If you lived in my body, you would know what it feels like to feel pain. To live with pain and sometimes live in pain. And I'm not just talking about the emotional pain or the external pain one feels when you break a leg, which, trust me, it hurts, I know, but it still cannot compare to the internal pain that I have experienced. Because it starts suddenly and, depending on how lucky I am, can end just as quickly. It comes from a place that is sometimes hard to find and sometimes hard to fix. The first time I ever experienced this pain, I was 13. I was in my 7th grade English class, sitting in the back of the room, free reading, minding my own business, when suddenly, out of nowhere, this pain attacks my lower left back and abdomen. At first, it feels like a pulled muscle, so I stretch. But to no avail. All my squirming accomplishes is for my classmates to stare at me and wonder. But I just can't sit still. The pain is too much. So I keep twisting and turning, trying to do anything I can to let my body be comfortable again and still. Finally, the bell rings and it's time for lunch. I try to walk out of the classroom not looking too much like a crazy person because I'm 13 and not looking like a crazy person is more important than letting people know I'm in extreme pain. And then, as I'm walking to the lunchroom, I think to myself, oh my God, I could be dying! I'm too young to die! I'm only 13! When I get to the lunchroom, the lunch lady stares at me and asks, would you like to go to the nurse? I nod because at this point that's all I can do. I'm panicking and the pain is becoming more than I can bear. And I'm gonna break into tears any minute now because I'm 13 and the world is just ending. So I go up to the nurse's office and she takes one look at me, decides to give me painkillers, hold on to me, and see if that does anything. But the painkillers don't work, so I'm left pacing back and forth in the small, cramped nurse's office. I'm 13 and there are so many other things I'd rather be doing right now, like listening to Avril Lavigne, talking to my friends, and eating ice cream. But I'm there in the nurse's office in pain, continuing to pace, and nothing seems to be working. The nurse begins to panic. This has never happened to her before. She's never not known what's wrong or been able to fix it. So she decides it's time to send me to the ER, where the fancy machines and doctors can take a look at me. She calls up my mom on the phone, but she's in a meeting, so she can't come get me. So my mom sends one of her teachers, who I know, to come pick me up. The teacher comes and loads my twitching body into the car and tries not to stare at me as we go down the freeway. But I just can't sit still. The pain is too much, so I move every few seconds, changing positions, trying to get comfortable again, and begging my body to be still. My constant moving must have made her nervous because, well, we arrived at the hospital in no time at all. With my dad eagerly waiting for me. I'm 13, and it's a little embarrassing to be seen with your father in a public place, but at this point I don't even care because he's taking me to the place that will give me the key to taking away the pain. So I follow him through all the entrances and form filling out. I'm 13, so they don't even ask me, is there a chance you could be pregnant? Because I'm not supposed to be having sex. I'm only 13. Not that I'd want to answer that question, because that's just gross. I'm 13 and I don't even know what sex is. I can't even handle it when the nurse asks me about my period. She's not even supposed to know that I'm old enough to have one of those. But the doctors and nurses take one look at me and decide that I must have kidney stones. I don't even know what kidney stones are, except for some vague recollection of a Friends episode. You know the one where Phoebe's giving birth and Joey has kidney stones? Man, when I was 13, I loved Friends even more than Avril Lavigne. And at this point I figure, hey, if Joey can handle it, so can I, right?
Totally.
But I remember spending most of the time waiting, pacing back and forth in the small, cramped, curtained-off ER waiting room. begging a God I wasn't even so sure I believed in, asking anyone in the universe to hear my cries and release me from my pain. I just want to be still. My body begins to ache, but not from the pain, but from the constant pacing, and I can feel exhaustion coming. When the nurse comes to get me for the CAT scan, she's surprised to find me up and about. She looks at me and asks, "Would you like to walk to the scanner?" Yes, walking would be good. Walking would be good. So I follow her and I bring my mom, who by this time had showed up at the hospital, to the CAT scan room. I don't remember much of the CAT scan, but I do remember what happened after it. That's when the doctor came and told me that, well, they couldn't find any kidney stones, but were sure I was going to pass them in a few days. So they gave my mom what looked like these strainers and told me to pee in them because they wanted to catch the kidney stone and examine it. Gross. I so did not want to pee into a strainer. That's just embarrassing. But you know what? At this point, I don't even care because they're going to give me the thing that will release me from my pain. But that's when the scary news comes next. That's when the doctor looks at me and says, "When we looked at the CAT scan, we checked out your ovaries and we found a cyst on each one of them." What? Why are they even looking at my ovaries? What are my ovaries? I'm 13 and there are so many other things I'd rather be talking about than my reproductive system. But the doctor assures me and my mother that they are nothing to worry about. They most certainly can't be the reason I'm in pain, that we're not going to have surgery, but maybe we should keep track of them in the next couple of years. But don't worry. So then they finally give me something to relieve me of my pain, and at last, I can be still. I can sit, I can stand, and I can lie still. So my mom sets me up in a comfy chair in our living room and puts on that episode of Friends. You know, the one where Joey has kidney stones? And my exhausted body drifts off to sleep. Now, this should be the end of my story, the story of a 13-year-old girl who went to the ER because she had kidney stones. But it's not, because I didn't have kidney stones. A month later, I go to the ER for the same pain, but they send me away saying it's nothing but back pain, and not to worry. But my mom was worried, so worried she began talking with her friends, and they decide that, well, it has to be the cysts that are causing me my pain. So my mom takes me to an OBGYN, her OBGYN, and he, unlike the ER doctors, is actually kind of concerned about the cysts. Luckily, he thinks of a non-surgery option, but nonetheless embarrassing to my 13-year-old self. Birth control. So there I was, a 13-year-old on birth control, not because I was out, having wild sex, but because my ovaries were defective. And I'm 13, so they don't even give me the pills. They give me the shot instead. And the OBGYN assures me that as long as I continue to stay on birth control, I shouldn't have the cysts and I should never be in pain again. But only if he could have been here 8 years later when I am now 21 and having the same pain in my lower left back and abdomen. Only this time, I'm not panicking and thinking that the world is going to end. Instead, I'm trying to avoid the pain and escape the ER. I'm trying so hard that I play Mario for 2 hours with my friend. But I can't escape the pain, just like when I was 13. So I drive myself home, and my parents take one look at me and know what's wrong. It had been 8 years, but they still had never forgotten the expression on my face when I was in that much pain. So the pacing begins again, and so do the ER visits. Though this time, instead of bringing the panicking and nervousness of a 13-year-old girl, I bring sarcasm and indifferentness. I joke with the nurses and my mom. I'm much better about the CAT scan. This time, I leave my mom in the room to text my dad, and I go, and I'm much better about lying still, even though every fiber of my being is begging me to move, to do anything to release me from the pain that I'm feeling. And just like before, they think I have kidney stones, even though my mom and I both know I don't. And when the CAT scan results come back, what do you know? I have cysts on my ovaries. One bigger one on my left one, which must be the reason that I'm in pain. So they send me home, high as a kite on painkillers, only to have the process repeat itself a month later. Though now it's getting serious. Now my doctors are beginning to make camps. One camp thinks it has to be kidney stones. The other one thinks that it must be the cysts on my ovaries, especially since I was just recently diagnosed with polycystic ovarian syndrome, which is a story for another day. A third camp thinks that maybe I have an infection in my kidneys. And now a new fourth camp thinks, what if it's the lining of your uterus growing outside of the uterus? No matter what, the doctors all agree on at least one thing, and that's the best treatment for my pain is to give me really strong painkillers. But that's not what I want. I don't want to be a 21-year-old with a permanent prescription to Vicodin and Percocet. I don't want to live with the fear that the pain could come back and it might never leave. My body is tired of the pain and the pacing and the feeling so exhausted that it can't move. It just wants to be like it is now in front of all of you. Free.